Now, let us, without further ado, talk to Andrew Bridgen, who I haven't spoken to for a while, actually. Andrew, very good morning to you. Welcome.
Morning, Mike.
I was listening to you the other night on Mr. Wales' show with some interest. Lots and lots of interesting things to talk to you about this morning. I'm not expecting you to go along with my treatise here today about Boris, but I really did feel sorry for him yesterday. I watched him, I looked at him. He was a broken man. He looks as if he's been defeated by coronavirus. And, I wouldn't blame him if he was. But what do you make of that?
Well, I actually wasn't on the briefing the Prime Minister gave. I was taking part in a virtual Q&A supporting the Police and Crime Commissioner candidate for Leicestershire and Rutland at the same time. But I mean, clearly, having coronavirus, affected the Prime Minister, and it's not been an easy time to be running the country over the last 12 months, has it? These are unprecedented times, huge pressure the Prime Minister's under, and obviously a vote on the renewal of the lockdown powers on Thursday, and I have expressed my concern that if we're sticking with the data and not the dates, and even under those dates, we're going to have be out of the lockdown by the middle of June. Why does the government need to extend its lockdown powers until the end of September?
Well, exactly right. And also, there are so many anomalies. And Andrew, as you know, we speak to everybody on a daily basis here in the Independent Republic. We talk to our listeners, we listen to our viewers. And basically what they're all asking me is, why can we not get a much better idea of what the problem is here? Because we've got a vaccine rollout which is better than any in the world. I think Israel now is the only country. We've overtaken the UAE in terms of the number of people being vaccinated. We've got a much lower rate of coronavirus than we've had probably since September of last year, maybe even before that. They're now talking about third waves and variants coming in from overseas and that we can't go on holiday. But surely what we can do, if we can't go abroad, is to shut the borders down and open up Britain, for heaven's sake.
Yeah, that's what we need to do to get our economy going, get jobs being created again, and get a head start on a really lacklustre European Union who've completely bundled everything. I'm told that the reason for the delay or the slow lifting of the lockdown is because of the fear of variants that may are resistant to the current vaccination, which will then require the vaccine to be tweaked somewhat, and probably a revaccination. This is very, very concerning.
Yeah, but every time there's been a new variant, people say that. Politicians in particular say that. But the scientists all say, don't worry, the vaccines are so good and they're so agile that you can actually tweak them very easily. And it doesn't actually need very much tweaking in order to stop anything from being a problem. Because, we are going to have this with us for a long time. And part of the reason I say it's time to replace Boris is that I think we need somebody who's a bit more forward-thinking, who's not looking back, who's not frightened of his own shadow, who believes in Britain being successful and believes in taking what we've done with the vaccine and actually capitalising on it, not cowering behind a cupboard because, there might be something out there we don't know about.
I don't agree with that analysis. I supported Boris Johnson to be Prime Minister. I think he's an inspirational figure. He won us a fantastic majority in 2019. He's handled the country during unprecedented times, and I'm going to stick with him. But the fact is, I think I detect a degree of apathy in that we're so far ahead with our vaccination programme of the rest of Europe, certainly our major competitor economies, that it's a bit like we're in a race to the finish line. And we're so many laps ahead of our competitors that we think we can just stroll to the finish line. Well, we need to sprint to that finish line and get over it and get our economy opened up.
Yeah.
And get
but I mean, unfortunately, it's not a race to the finish line because somebody's burning down the clubhouse behind you. You're not looking that way. Here's the thing. Basically, if we were in this position last September and with the numbers that are currently on the database, we wouldn't even be going into tier 2. And that was before we had the vaccine. So what's different?
Well, the only excuse I'm hearing is this fear of a variant that's going to be resistant to the vaccine.
Yeah, but there's no evidence for that, Andrew.
Let me finish, Mike.
I will. Of course, I let you finish, Andrew. I'm not one of those interrupting people. You know that.
If we live in that fear that there may be a variant that will be resistant to the vaccine, then we'll never be able to unlock.
Exactly. But that's exactly my point.
That's the situation we find ourselves in if we're going to live in that fear. So
but we've now got the fear of the third wave, which we haven't got because we have a vaccine. We shouldn't get it. We're in fear of a variant that hasn't happened yet, and we're also in fear of opening up too soon because it might look bad when we do the inquiry. I mean, you can find anybody to be frightened of anything, and I'm afraid that's why I call for Boris to be replaced, because I think he's now a man in fear of his own shadow. And I don't blame him for that, but it's not helpful to the country. I don't want a Prime Minister who says this is going to haunt me for the rest of time. I don't want that.
Well, I think one of the problems is that the people who've surrounded Number 10 and the Prime Minister for the last 12 months, out of necessity, the sage advisors, the Chief Medical Officer, the suppliers of the PPE, the suppliers of track and trace and all those services, they've got a huge vested interest in continuing these measures, whereas I think it relies on backbenchers such as myself, representing constituencies outside London, who, not everyone out there in the country, not all of my constituents have been able to work, have had a good lockdown.
No, of course not.
A lot of the people around Number 10 and Westminster, they're having a pretty good lockdown. They're working from home and the money's still rolling in. This is not the picture across the whole of the country, and I think it beholds backbench MPs to hold the government to account and explain this to them.
I mean, let's face it, Chris Whitty hasn't had to cancel any big nights out, has he, over the course of the past year? This is a bloke who doesn't go anywhere. He hasn't had to cancel anything. He's quite happy to continue to work from home.
People in that position have enjoyed huge power and authority over the last 12 months without any accountability to the British people. He's not standing for re-election. Yeah. He never stood for election. It's not a position that's tenable, in my view.
And we, as almost the sole broadcaster out there in this country, speak to and speak for an awful lot of people in this country, and we get ignored by this government. Government ministers don't come on this station because they don't like being asked tough questions, and we're asking the questions that people want to answer. How is that working?
Well, I mean, I do hate it when whether it's your programme or the left-wing biased BBC on Newsnight when they announced that we approached the government but no one was available for comment. I mean, there are plenty of government ministers who could be put up, or indeed the party chairman should be out there defending the government line. That's part of our democracy, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, I know, but you start to wonder if there's a specific reason why the last 2 days, 2 senior government ministers have not come on to Talk Radio to talk about their policies. Where have they gone everywhere else?
And those are questions you'd have to ask those ministers. I can't speak for the government.
Andrew, listen, I appreciate that. I'm not asking you to. I'm just laying out for you what we hear every single day. We talk to people that are in hospitality businesses, which are on the brink of collapse. We talk to people who are freelancers, self-employed businessmen, people who run small businesses, people who can't do their business, can't do their work because of this crazy fear that's out there. And it's all emanating from Downing Street.
Well, also, I mean, I've got one of the major employment hub in northwest Leicestershire is East Midlands Airport. It's doing very well on the cargo, but obviously, as far as passenger transport's concerned, it's absolutely desperate times. And until they've got a date when we may possibly be able to travel, people just aren't going to book holidays. You're going to have the collapse, if not careful, of major airlines and travel companies. Yeah.
Exactly right. And I mean, there are those who have, as you described it, a good lockdown, who talk about, well, why do you always want to go on holiday? Why can't you just last without a holiday? It's only another 4 weeks. Well, it's only another 4 weeks until the 4 weeks is up, and then it becomes another 4 weeks. I mean, we heard this week that the May 17 day, when an awful lot of people have actually booked flights out of this country to go away, has now been pushed forward, or back, whichever way you look at it, and it might be July before anybody can go anywhere. And that is simply not acceptable. If you say that it's too dangerous to go to Europe because their instances of coronavirus are too high, why was it that we could have gone there last summer? We've got a perfectly good system that you could put into place at airports where you test people. People have been vaccinated anyway. What's the problem?
Indeed, and I've been pressing the government because currently there's no provision for people who've been fully vaccinated to circumvent the lockdown, our self-isolation measures, either coming in or going out of the country. And obviously, we're going to have an increasing proportion of our population and people from other countries who are going to be able to prove that they're fully vaccinated from the virus.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you cannot make the entire country and the entire world risk-free. You could get on a plane to Mallorca and it might crash into the Adriatic. You can't tell me, therefore, you can stop people getting on planes, can you?
Well, I've been thinking about this, and if we're not careful, we're getting into a situation where the government's not going to allow anyone to die of COVID, but also no one's allowed to live, and that is not the lifestyle that most of our constituents want to live.
No, I mean, there was this ludicrous call last night for once again another vigil. We've become obsessed with vigils, right? Most of the people that I have spoken to in the last 24 hours said that they did not see anyone in their street holding a candle up. There's a couple of pictures on some of the front pages this morning, but most people are sick to death of it. Most people they're very sad that people have died. They're very sorry for anybody who's lost loved ones, and families who have lost loved ones should indeed be entitled to grieve for them. But we are also a country which has got the large bulk of the people in it who have not been killed by COVID, who have not suffered that much as a result of it, apart from economically, and because they can't work.
I certainly know a number of acquaintances who've sadly passed due to coronavirus over the last 12 months, so I couldn't quite agree with that.
Well, it's not. Well, Andrew, I'm not saying you don't know. I'm not saying you don't. I'm not saying you don't know anybody, but what I'm saying is that there's a far bigger number of people who have been affected because of the lockdown than have been affected because of coronavirus. Because let's face it, when you know that 4.5 million people have tested positive for coronavirus in the last year and 126,000 people have died, that means it's between 1% and 2% of those who tested positive who died, right? That means by far and away the biggest proportion of people, 99.5% of the people in this country, have not died.
Absolutely, and I've explained to Number 10 that we brought in the lockdown measures to control the coronavirus outbreak, but we almost now we need a policy from the government to get over the side effects of the lockdown, which are absolutely immense on mental health, well-being, child development, their education, and these people are going to carry this burden with them for years, if not the rest of their lives. This is going to have a huge effect on our society and across the world.
Yes, exactly. Let's talk a little bit, Andrew, about this other big story, Priti Patel's new rules for illegal migrants, with another attempt to stop the flow of people coming here illegally, trying to basically say that a new bill, which won't be introduced till the autumn, but will be introduced as a bill, will basically make it impossible for many illegal migrants to settle in the UK, even if their asylum case is accepted. Is this going to work? Because we've had lots of attempts at making something work. I'm not certain that this will work any better.
Well, it'll come under attack from the lawyers, of course. But I think this is long overdue. It's exactly what we want. And it's going to have the support of a population. So genuine asylum seekers will get more support and help to integrate into our society. And those who are purely economic migrants entering the country illegally will be turned round quickly. That's going to act as a disincentive. And also, who's not going to support cracking down on these people traffickers who are basically trading and making a fortune of absolute misery and pushing people onto a very dangerous journey where some of them are going to lose their lives with very little hope of actually settling in the UK. I think even the most ardent of Francophobes would not to be able to claim that France is not a safe country if you're an asylum seeker to claim asylum. The fact is that when we were in the European Union, they could claim asylum in various European countries, be settled, and then later move to the UK. Obviously, now that we're outside the European Union, that option is not open to, which is, I think, why we're seeing a lot more of them travelling in small boats at huge risk across the Channel in the hope of getting settled in the UK when they actually have almost no hope of being able to do so.
Yes, but the trouble is the system is such that they can hang around for a very, very long time while they're in the process of being processed, if you like. The Mail today, another 150 crossed to Dover on small boats yesterday alone, and it seems to be getting worse.
When their last appeal fails, what they do is they just disappear then into the underground culture, the subculture, which is the modern slavery market of illegal immigrants within the UK, and that's an issue that is quite local to us in Leicester, as we've seen in the garment industry, and that needs to be dealt with as well.
Yeah, there are so many reasons why it needs to be fixed. There's no doubt about that, Andrew, and you're right that people would support any measure to do so. The question is, can it be fixed? Because we've seen this all before, and unfortunately, none of it's worked.
Well, it can be fixed, but it will come under a lot of attack from the left and the human rights lawyers, won't it? We know this.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got to see it off. It's not in the interests of the migrants themselves to be stuck in limbo. It's not in their interest to abscond within the UK and disappear into that subculture where they're going to be exploited for the rest of their lives in modern slavery conditions in the UK. And it's not in our interest to encourage people to profit from taking huge amounts of money and probably indenturing them in debt, so they'll have to go into the modern slavery market to repay the people traffickers. I'm fully supportive of people trading on that sort of misery, getting life sentences.
Okay. And finally, Andrew, can you assure us you're going to be voting against extending the lockdown restrictions until September, or the lockdown rules, if you like? That's
what I told my whip this morning. I'm coming under a lot of pressure. I'm going to read the powers that the government claim they're giving up, but it seems unprecedented to me to take those powers until the end of September, when even the government's modest roadmap, very conservative roadmap for lifting the lockdown, says that we'll be out in June. And I think the conspiracy theorists will just have a field day if we extend till September.
Yeah, well, it might not just be them. It could be a big problem indeed. Andrew, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Andrew Bridgen MP for North West Leicestershire, of course, telling us that he's not going to agree to the government extending some of their powers into September. But let's talk about the main event here. Let's talk about the big issue this morning right here on the Independent Republican, Mike Graham. It's very clear from what I've seen, and you can see, let me hold this up for you, the front page of the Daily Mail. This will haunt me for as long as I live. Look into his eyes and tell me that he's the man to take us out of this, because I don't think he is. This is Talk Radio.